Unstuck in Time, Memoir of a Time Traveler by Carol Louis. Chapter 5, I Remember Jingxiu. Karmic evolution embraces the development of personality and the refinement of skills and aptitudes. From life between life, scientific explorations into the void, separating one incarnation from the next, by Joel L. Witten, MD, PhD, and Joe Fisher. Lei Jingxiu arrived early, long before the others. It was quiet in the studio. He was pleased to see the tables were orderly, brushes were clean, hanging in their racks, and clean paper spread out ready for the new day. He loved order. He inspected the previous day's work, drawings, documents, models, and inventories, making notations where corrections were needed. His attention to detail won him favor with the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. However, he knew the apprentices who discovered marks on their work felt irritated, knowing they would have to start over again. But their work reflected on him, on Yangshi Lei. Next, Jingxiu sipped a cup of pearl jasmine tea. The aroma of tea awakened his senses, and the sensation of the smooth texture of the Celadon porcelain teacup on his lips touched him in inexplicable ways, not only to China's tea culture, but also to China's long history. He sipped his tea while he meticulously reviewed the ledgers, always looking for ways to save money. His fingers nimbly moved the abacus beads, and he delighted when his calculations matched the records. He prepared his reports to be delivered to the ministry. Writing was almost a form of meditation for him, whether ledgers, reports, letters, or transcribing the masters. Then he changed his outer garment to his official robe, lining up the edges of the Mandarin Square and smoothing out any creases before he headed out to inspect construction sites, production shops, and warehouses. Nothing was overlooked. He had a keen eye for a joint that was off ever so slightly, and for any stacks of materials designated for waste that could be salvaged. He had an uncanny memory of the inventory. As he did in the studio, he left more notes with details about adjustments. He took pride in their work and their skill. Although he expected quality workmanship from the workers and apprentices, he did not lord it over them. They had an illustrious reputation to uphold. After all, Yangshi Lei held the record for the longest time of continuous service in the design department for the Qing dynasty. He delighted when he completed a project and celebrated with a feast for everyone, including their families. Food from all regions celebrated his workers. Although he often felt like a pawn, pushed around by the whims of the Emperor and Empress Dowager, he could not deny the satisfaction he felt creating beautiful buildings and gardens. He knew his work did not compare to his ancestors, but he was both honored and humbled to carry on their legacy. Times have changed since his ancestor Lei Fada came to the Forbidden City to work on the Hall of Supreme Harmony after it had been destroyed by fire. Lei Fada rose to the lead of the Imperial Design Department, and each generation since added to the clan's standing. Now, foreigners brought their foreign ways into the Middle Kingdom, encroaching closer to the Forbidden City. Some, like Giuseppe Castiglione, embraced the ancient civilization. Others, like Lord Eglin, did not. Jingxiu wondered what effect the foreigners would have on his family's future. At the same time Lei Jingxiu oversaw the construction details, he kept a watchful eye for facts to substantiate the rumors he heard during his inspections and among the merchants he traded with on occasion. Others told him to let the managers handle such matters, but he knew that it paid to socialize with the merchants at the tea rooms, near the river where news flowed as fast as the tea. The merchants, particularly the ones in the south, who had traded with the foreigners on a regular basis for many years, were the pulse of China, whether the ministers knew it or not. When evidence accumulated backing up the rumors of the foreigners' intentions to use force to stake their claims, Jingxiu saw the seriousness of the situation. He knew all too well that the ministers in the palace were self-serving and that Emperor Xiangfeng was ill-advised. Even though he tried to stay clear of the palace intrigue, he was close enough to see that what was happening would not end well. Memories of the Opium War and its aftermath were fresh in his mind. Jingxiu hired people he trusted to do reconnaissance and fill in the gaps while he began to formulate a plan. The reports came in, and as he suspected, the situation was heating up. Just as he paid attention to every detail of architectural design, decorations, and landscape design, he applied the same principle to his plan to save the work of Yang Shirlei and 5 generations of designs. It was no small task, and he hated being devious, but there was no other way. He knew that there was no gain to apply for permission and everything to lose if his plan was discovered. He had to take the chance. Jingxiu smiled contently when it came together, like the clockworks Emperor Qianlong loved so much, but he knew he was running out of time. Every day his wagons and carts arrived with supplies, and every day they departed with books and drawings hidden under the empty boxes. The drivers made sure to take different routes as they left Yuan until they ended up at the lay residences in the Haidian district. The iron models were more challenging to move without damaging them. Many had lasted decades and had made the journey back and forth at the emperor's beckoning, but he wondered whether they would survive this move or not. He worried, thinking about the artifacts they would have to sacrifice lest their scheme was revealed. He sent his family away for their safety, but also to give him more freedom to oversee every detail. However, no amount of preparation could give him a sense of peace when the foreigners invaded Yuan. He stood on the balcony of his residence and watched as flames roared above the skyline. He imagined the years of hard work going up in smoke and cringed when reports came about the barbarians looting and devastating the treasures without regard to their value. He was relieved his family was away, but worried about the workers and their families. The situation was worse than he imagined, and at times more than he could bear. After days of going nonstop, Jingxiu felt exhausted. He fell asleep on his desk, teacup in hand, and to his surprise a vision of new gardens began to take shape. In his dream state, he sketched the ideas as fast as he could. A part of him knew that what he and the others had worked so diligently to build were embers, but somehow He saw the new buildings come together the same. He knew his ancestors had a hand in what was no small feat, and he knew it would help rebuild the buildings, if not the dynasty. Backstory. I suspected I had been an architect or designer in a previous life, but I had no idea that a past life as an architect would intersect with my Chinese genealogy research. That is exactly what happened on March 26, 2016, months before I traveled to my ancestors' village, Sandosun, Taishan, Guangdong Province, China. My friends on the other side woke me up early that morning. When I meditated to tune into their message, I heard two words through the static: Chinese architect. And when I Googled those two words, I was surprised to find an article about Yang Shirlei, 8 generations of architects who worked for the Qing dynasty emperors. Lei is the Mandarin version of Louis, the American translation of Loi in Cantonese. Our clan is relatively small, so it is safe to say we are related somewhere on the family tree. I had no idea how many generations back it would take to find our common ancestor. I knew so little about my ancestors at that point, but that was about to change when I went to the National Archives in San Bruno. I learned more about Dad's story and family than ever before, poring over the files from my father, uncle, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Until then, I had no idea my great-grandfather, Louis Fat, came to the United States in 1881 as a partner of Feng Song Lung and Company on Grant Avenue. I grew up thinking Dad was a chef, but I discovered he entered the United States in 1928 as a merchant's son, an exemption status during the time of the Chinese Exclusion Act. I learned not only names of people I did not know on my family tree, but I also learned about their Chinese American experience. I understood why my father was so secretive about the past. My research guided me to my father's and great-grandfather's villages in November 2016, and I began to understand more about my ancestors. When I discovered the Louis Zupu, the genealogy book, and began learning Chinese, I made the connection between my branch of the family tree and Yang Shirlei. The universe surprised me with more information about Yang Shirlei through friends at the William and Mary Confucius Institute. An article in the Guangzhou newspaper, documentaries on CCTV, and articles via Chinese sources provided a wealth of information. The more I learned about each generation, the more I sensed I was part of this branch of the family. But which part? More research and another trip to China in 2018, this time focusing on Yang Shirlei, added another section to my cosmic puzzle. I was able to arrange a reunion with the descendants, the 10th and 11th generations, and as I walked through the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, and Yuan, the Summer Palace, I was overwhelmed by inexplicable feelings. A vision of the destruction of Yuan stirred anger toward the Anglo-Saxon forces. Seeing the marble boat triggered Lei Jingxiu's frustration with Emperor Xianfeng and Empress Dowager Su Shi. My attempt to visit the museum where the Yang Shirlei artifacts were on display was unsuccessful. but I absorbed every detail of the architecture and the furniture and accessories, even the landscape, the stone patterns and the bridges. Every detail triggered more memories and finally made sense of events in my life, beginning with the vision I had when I was 11 years old about being an architect. I was living on the farm in the Florida Panhandle with my grandparents. It was the summer of 1959. My brother, sister, and I were among the people who were picking cotton on the Hudson's farm in the stifling heat. The Hudsons fed the laborers a big lunch, and then we rested a while before heading back out to the fields. I sat alone under an oak tree when a man appeared to me. I saw through him, so I knew he was one of the ghosts that I had seen, but I was not afraid of him. He was dressed unlike anyone I had ever seen. I could not make out every word he said, which reminded me of Chinese, but sounded different from what I remembered from San Francisco's Chinatown. Even though the words were garbled as if from the bad reception on a radio, I heard the word architect, and I recognized the drawings he spread out for me. The vision awakened something in me I now know as a past life memory. A seed was planted. When I found a book in my 6th grade class about Frank Lloyd Wright, I knew it confirmed my desire to be an architect. Because I had to work in the cafeteria at school, I did not have much time for recess. But when I did, instead of playing with dolls, I drew the make-believe houses for the girls on the playground. I drew what I saw in my mind's eye, which was a floor plan in isometric perspective. I remember including the view out of the window as well as the furnishings. When I started high school in 1962 and girls were allowed into drafting classes, I signed up. I loved thinking about how all the parts of an object came together, and I lost myself in my drawings. It seemed as if I were destined to be an architect until I discovered I have dyslexia, which affected my ability to do the higher math that was needed. After reading the book about Frank Lloyd Wright, I knew I wanted to be an organic designer, integrating architecture with the interior and landscape. So I decided to go into interior design. I was fortunate that my drafting classes prepared me for my college classes and for working with builders in my design career. Working in Naples, Florida with very wealthy clients who expected me to be at their beck and call had a familiar ring, especially one client who, like Emperor Xiangfeng, insisted on scale models for every aspect of construction. There was something decadent about the lifestyle of my clients that was unnerving. My favorite job was working on model homes where I had more creative freedom. I began visualizing a family for the model and selecting items including unusual details for my imaginary family. Details like a floppy-eared stuffed rabbit, a fly fishing apparatus, and a portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Details that fit the clients who bought the furnished models. When feng shui books came out in the 1980s, I was one of the first designers to study feng shui. Like drafting and design, feng shui came easy for me. It was as if instead of learning, I was remembering. This was made clear to me when I questioned some of the principles of feng shui books in the earlier books about it, which came from practitioners of the Black Hat set Tibetan Buddhist feng shui. When I discovered books about Taoist feng shui, I suspected I resonated with those teachings because I had been Taoist in another lifetime. When I discovered Yangshi Lei, it made sense to me why I preferred one school of feng shui over another. My love of architecture, my strong attraction to all things Asian, including many furnishings and accessories in my home. Even though my brother, sister, and I grew up in the same environment, I was the one who collected Chinese artifacts and whose passion for our Chinese genealogy helped me unearth our family's past. I was the one who felt drawn to go to China first in 1985 and then again in 2016 and 2018. Of all the past lives I have remembered, Lei Jingxiu's story resonates with me on so many levels. The connection with the Louis family, my love of design, especially Chinese design, and with Lei Jingxiu's character and personality. I resonated with his dedication to his craft, his self-discipline and attention to detail, and his hands-on approach. Even little things like record-keeping, the connections between my subcontractors, and events planning. For me, Lei Jingxiu was a wonderful example of carrying gifts and knowledge from one life to another. Of course, the challenges of unresolved issues carried over too. He struggled for many reasons to balance his work and his family life. In this life, I also struggled between my design career and my family. But in this life, when given a choice, I chose family before career. I only wish I had known earlier in this life what I know now. I believe remembering Lei Jingxiu was in some way a kind of karmic reward for all my hard work, pushing through the early trauma, discovering its connection to previous lives. In fact, I believe these were a prerequisite to prepare me to remember Lei Jingxiu. Just as Lei Jingxiu preserved the records of Yangshi Lei from destruction during the Second Opium War, in this lifetime, I preserved their story in my book. The legacy of the Lei family architects lives on, the story of Yangshi Lei. Next, Lei Jingxiu had me revisit the summer of 1959. In my regression to those moments when I sat under the oak tree and saw the man that I now knew was Lei Jingxiu, the static cleared as I tuned into his frequency. I heard clearly what he said to me that day. You are the architect of your life. Your thoughts, words, and actions create the foundation and the framework for your experiences. Live well. Be happy.